which we're going to talk about a lot of interesting things here. But Joshua, introduce yourself to the audience. Who are you? What's your background? How did you get involved, interested in ghostwriting? And why are you the best?
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the beginning. And first of all, I appreciate the opportunity, Michael, to chat. This is going to be a lot of fun today. So I became a ghostwriter completely by accident. My lifelong ambition as a youngster was to be a published novelist. And that did, in fact, come to pass when I was 20 years old. I got a small independent press 2-book publishing deal. And then something interesting happened. As I'm going out, hawking books, signing copies, taking selfies with fans, back in the days when you had to do that flip phones. And so you turn the phone around and then it would be smudged and off center and look terrible. But that is just the way that it was. Something interesting happened at that time. 2 of my freelance writing clients at that time, I had a little freelance writing business doing some product description and other type of writing work. 2 of those clients saw my novels, read my novels, loved my novels, and said, Joshua, I've wanted to write a book longer than you've even been alive. And you've done it twice. Can you help me out here? And I said, okay, fine, sure. I'll help you with your book. And I'd been saying, okay, fine, sure. I'll help you with your book ever since then. And I'm currently ghostwriting the 81st, 82nd, and 83rd full-length nonfiction books of my career. I'm a bit of a machine, and I'm very much into process improvement, standardization of procedures, the usual things that are not sexy, but they can build a 7-figure business. And it's a lot of fun ghostwriting for people because I get to act in print and put on a different author's worldview every day, see the world from their perspective with their beliefs and values, so on and so forth. And I'm at the point where I've written the go-to book on just about every topic there is out there, with some few exceptions. And of course, I finally just finished my book after 12 years of doing this.
Okay, so there's a lot I want to unpack on this. So first of all, the idea of writing in somebody else's voice, I think, is very challenging and underappreciated by those that haven't tried to do that. I had a phase where I tried to do things like that, and it is not easy because not only do you have to then write their voice, but you have to think like that person. And then if they think in ways that you don't necessarily agree with, there's almost a cognitive dissonance, right? In terms of your thought, trying to get their thought on paper and not somehow putting your own spin on things. How do you separate you as a person, you as somebody who has his own thoughts on the world and the way things work, with those of clients?
Yes, you're right. There could be any given day where I am ghostwriting for someone who's of one religion or another, and I'm switching from adopting, even for a brief few moments, the assumption that what the person is saying to me is true, and then writing from that perspective, and then taking off those beliefs and values and then putting on someone else's, and doing that over and over. It's pretty wild. But the way that I am able to do this without going crazy, at least from my perspective, that might have actually happened already, and that's for you all to decide. The way that I did that was I was on the university debate team when I was in college. And in debate, formal debate, there's what's called debate protocol. And it's this idea that you are able to adopt a position as your own, even if you disagree with it, but you're able to argue it better than adherents of that position. And you could switch sides and switch perspectives. And prior to a tournament, you need to prepare yourself because you don't know which side you're going to have to argue. I would later repurpose into ghostwriting so that I could suspend disbelief, suspend the judgment, and adopt one client's perspective as my own so that I could write from that perspective. So formal debate is undefeated in terms of preparation for a career as a ghostwriter. And again, it was completely an accident that happened because at that time I was working on my novels. And it's kind of like what Steve Jobs said, where you can't connect the dots forward, but you can connect the dots backwards. And in so doing, that might in fact be a nice little recommendation for other aspiring ghostwriters out there who might be in the formative years of life, perhaps at university. Consider debate protocol and the ability to learn the most persuasive arguments for any given position so you could think that way as a ghostwriter.
I know there's no way to probably know this number, but do you get a sense that there are many more books that are out there that are written by ghostwriters than people realize?
Oh, yes. Any given day, major bestseller lists, be that Amazon or the Wall Street Journal or New York Times, so on and so forth. Anywhere from 80 to 90% of the top bestsellers are, in fact, ghostwritten.
I find that to be actually first of all, I guess not surprising, but also remarkable at the same time, because if that's the case, it sounds to me that, somebody has some name recognition. They want to be an author. They don't have the time to actually be the author, but they want to leverage their name. So they go out to someone like you. And for them, it's a way of just getting their brand out there in different mediums, even though it's not necessarily coming from their voice.
One of the things that we do is it is in fact our job to capture the voice of the author, capture their perspective. And one of the things that I do is I look at other content that my authors have previously written, be it tweets or threads or blog articles or LinkedIn articles. And I look at specific tells of theirs that indicate that they have a unique writing style. And this is what I've learned. Most people don't have an author voice. They don't have a writing style. There's a sort of a generic stream of consciousness writing voice that the average person has. Now, what is interesting is people who do in fact have a distinct voice or type, let's say based on their profession. So like a surgeon, for example, is used to being brief, is used to being blunt, is used to being descriptive as much as possible, using jargon from their world that is going to be understood. And they don't need to digress and explain in 5 paragraphs what particular terminology means. But most people reading that surgeon's book are not surgeons. So for that person for me to capture their voice would be doing a disservice to readers. And so it's my job to, you might say, translate an author's perspective and their communication style and so forth into what is going to be accessible to the most readers of theirs, the most valuable readers, I should say, to them.
Right. You have to some extent, find it's not quite the lowest common denominator, but that's sort of the idea, right? It's for common understanding.
Yes. And here's a little thought experiment. It's a brief thought experiment that I give my authors. It just so happens to be a more true than untrue thought experiment. So this is the idea. Imagine your ideal reader is sitting in the middle seat, cramped on an airplane. They purchased a first class ticket, but somehow they ended up back in business class. So it's not as comfortable as I thought. And they're a little annoyed. It's hot and simultaneously cold on the airplane, somehow, some way. And there's a baby crying. And the person behind them is coughing up a lung. And their Bluetooth earbuds are low battery. And they're waiting on their beverage trolley, hoping that they have their favorite beverage of choice. In that frenzied, chaotic, emotional state, your ideal reader reaches in their bag and pulls out your book. Your writing style, tone, language tier, vocabulary, etc., must match that person's reading state, that hyper distracted reading state. Your book must be so good, so easy to read that you're able to hold their attention. So quit the abstract language, the vague generic explanations, the going on and on and on and on and on a particular point. This is what people say they get when they write in a review. This book should have been a blog post. That's what they mean. So we want to do the opposite of that. But that one thought experiment can help guide the level of depth and even the sophistication of the writing style that the author should present. Is imagine that little thought experiment of the ideal reader on that airplane, and you are writing to them while they're in that hyper distracted state. And it turns out that they will probably be in a hyper distracted state when they're reading their book, whether it's they're counting down the minutes on their lunch before they go back to work, or they're exercising and doing chores around the house where they've got your audiobook on, and you need to hold their attention continuously. And this is why I've learned and become certified as a hypnotist, because hypnotists understand how to retain an individual's attention for a significant amount of time. I should say a relatively significant amount of time. And it just turns out that a book is a long form self-hypnosis script, from my perspective.
That's an interesting way to frame it. And from an hypnosis standpoint, I have to imagine that it becomes challenging also just to convert that into written word. I think when people think about hypnosis, they're thinking about face to face and, look into the thing that's swinging, right? And relax your mind. Whereas, your point about convincing someone of something using techniques of hypnosis is intriguing. I'm curious how you actually translate that to written format.
Yes. So novels are long form self hypnosis scripts. And this allows us to identify a useful definition of hypnosis and self hypnosis. When someone is reading a novel, what's happening? They're creating in their mind's eye and also in their mind's ear and mind's nose and so on and so forth and mind's senses, what the world of the author's story looks like, the appearance of the characters, how the place looks, how it smells, so on and so forth. This is a multisensory simulation that is taking place in the reader's mind as they're reading the novel. That is hypnosis. That is hypnosis. And so as a nonfiction ghostwriter, and now nonfiction author, I'm able to deploy multisensory persuasion to describe how something looks when you are doing it right. What you're hearing from people to confirm you're on the right path. How you can smell something is a little fishy, or this just tastes off as you get into it. And I can use that multisensory language, concrete vocabulary, so people can see themselves, that they can see the world I'm describing in nonfiction, be it for myself or for my authors. And there's particular techniques we can also use that help people kind of get scooted along a bit further in reading the book. Because we know that the more of a book, the more percentage of a book a reader reads, the more likely they are to recommend the book. And the more likely they are to recommend the book, the more copies are likely to be sold, because word of mouth is responsible for 92% of all book sales that take place, according to Nielsen. And therefore, we want people to read as much of the book as possible. Therefore, we want to write a long-form self-hypnosis script.
I gotta also imagine it's challenging for a ghostwriter to see something they've written really take off and become a bestseller, see their client get all the credit while they were the person actually putting the work in. Have you ever had an instance where jealousy is not quite the right word, but you say to yourself, man, if people only knew that it wasn't this guy, it was actually me. I gotta assume that's a very human feeling that's natural for ghostwriters.
It is, and I expect that there are innumerable numbers of ghostwriters who have that experience. I didn't, because I never wanted to be a ghostwriter. I wanted to be an author, and I scratched that itch, so to speak. I stroked that ego, you might say. I fulfilled that dream, and then it became gratifying and satisfying to help other people do the same with their books. I'd already been interviewed by the journalists and seen my face in the newspapers and done the book signings and clicked refresh on the Amazon reviews of my book every 5 minutes to see what else was happening in the weeks after release, and then taking screenshots of those reviews and distribute them all across social media. I had been there 2012, 2013 as a young author. And so now helping do that for my own authors in their world, it was really cool. You might compare it to those women who are both mothers and also midwives or doulas, where they know what it's like to be that person. And now they know what sort of support that person needs and what it is that they're going through. And I'm unique as a ghostwriter because I'm both the mother and the midwife, literally speaking.
For everyone that's here for the remaining minutes, everybody please make sure you follow Joshua Lisec here on Twitter. If anything you want to come up and ask questions, click that bottom left mic request button. And as always, this will be in podcast on all of your favorite platforms under Lead Lag Live. Your Twitter profile says authority developer, which I think is an interesting term because, anybody who's authoritative has people that help that person get to that point of be seen as an authority figure. But how do you get somebody to be viewed as authoritative? And this is more than just sort of the ghostwriting side of things, but how do you get somebody to just be seen as a thought leader when in reality, it's hard to stand out?
It is hard to stand out, yes. There's been a journey myself for figuring out precisely what my marketplace positioning is as a professional nonfiction book ghostwriter. And I noticed maybe 2015, 2016, what my authors were using their books for. Up to that time, I had ghostwritten for quite a few preachers, televangelists, autobiographical types who wanted to share their story and their message and inspire people. And it's kind of a touchy-feely qualitative art. And then I found myself in the world of internet marketing at that time because I had copywritten quite a few sales pages and book descriptions. And people said, why don't you just write the next book that we're going to do? That's how that transition happened. And I noticed that the prospects, the aspiring authors who were coming to me, they kept saying, Joshua, I'm an expert, but I'm not an authority because I don't have a book. And I have heard that over and over. I'm an expert, but I'm not an authority because I don't have a book. I'm an expert, but I'm not the authority because I don't have the book. I need the book. It can't just be a book. It needs to be the book. And I would ask, what do you mean by the book? And these aspiring authors would say, it needs to be the go-to book that can last for the next 5 years, 10 years. I can have on my website for the next 20 years even, thinking long-term that this book can be the first product people purchase of mine. They adopt my worldview. They see the industry the way I see it, even if no one else sees it this way. And then I cultivate desire for my products and other services. So I can convert a $20 paperback buyer into a $200 course customer, into a $2,000 coaching consult, into a $20,000 a month retainer. And it's that sort of authority book that I found myself beginning to write circa 2015, 2016. And the stories that have come out of that, the cases of success that have come out of that have been spectacular. Working with people who they had just launched their business the same month that the book came out. And they went on to great financial success, becoming the go-to speaker, getting invitations at major universities, be those on the West Coast or be they Ivy League, getting prospects reaching out, willing to pay $1,000 an hour for their time. It's just been absolutely fun for these experts turned authorities because of the book. And I found that my work as a ghostwriter is not just to write the book. It's to tell the author what the correct book for them is to write. And for a lot of authors, that's the first and only time in their week that someone else gets to call the shots. They don't have to be the executive decision maker. They can sit back and let the expert do their work. It's going to be right. And the result is going to be an authority book that builds their credibility, demonstrates their expertise, and goes counter to what many of the otherwise institutional experts in their domain are saying. And it's by going against the grain, they're able to command attention, particularly the attention of haters, critics, trolls, and competitors who might shout them down. Oh, there's no way your results are legitimate. Oh, you're basically a fraud. You're literally just out here cheating and lying. So these authors of mine, in many cases, have become so good they call you a fake. And that's the title of my new book.
That's a very smooth transition, by the way. We've spoken to, but let's go to some of the audience.
Yes. So there's three things that come to mind. So the first thing is that there are professional actors that we all know of, and these are actors who are able to play a variety of roles, from great heroes to the darkest of villains. And it's the believability of the dark villain as portrayed by the actor or actress that makes an actor or actress such an excellent portrayer of that character. I have some professional acting experience myself and in theater, and becoming someone else from the perspective of other people is second nature to me. And so that's another tip I can give for people who are developing their talent stack and they want to become ghostwriters one day. Not just the debate protocol or the unsexy product or project management, but also acting, particularly improv acting is good. That's the first thing is it's a bit like acting where I can take on someone else's beliefs and write from that perspective. And man, I don't mind if I disagree with it because, well, I'm just playing the character of this author who believes these things. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that if there is someone whose beliefs are so starkly different from mine, I don't want them to be successful. I will straight up tell them. I will say, hey, I appreciate you bringing this to me, but I don't support this worldview and I do not want to develop you into an authority on that topic. Some people refer to me as a literary kingmaker or queenmaker. And there are a lot of people that I do not want to king or queen by writing them an authority book. That's the second thing. And then the third thing is with this particular set of novels that you have in mind, focus not on what the author wants to say, but on who the author wants to reach. This is key because as the ghostwriter, you are not my client. Your readers are my client. I'm not writing for you. I'm writing for the people. That it can create some tension and some conflict. The larger an author's ego is, the worse their book is going to be in most cases, because they're less likely to take the advice of the professional ghostwriter or editing or otherwise professionals team that they've brought on board. But if we can focus on what the reading experience is going to be like, the avoidance of alienating readers, I found that usually is able to reach most people and can talk them back from a literary edge, so to speak. And perhaps it's not the edge to jump off, but it's the edge of a weapon of mass persuasion that's fair enough to jab into an audience member who wasn't prepared for that. Now, one more thing I will say on that is it can sometimes be wise, to cultivate organic hate or at least negativity from an audience of people that you do not want to reach and you do not want writing or reading your book or otherwise buying your
I am
products.
very good at that, by the way. I am apparently very good at that point. Yes.
Yes, I have seen that. And so the great reframe of my book, So Good They Call You a Fake, is that you want to be so good that midwits and those we might gently call NPCs are filling up your mentions with ridiculous accusations and insults, because that is in fact persuasion for you. You're so effective at what you do that there are people who can't point out anything wrong with it. They just have to come in with insults and labels. And haters can be your most valuable marketers in that regard. And so I've included in my book intentionally things that I hope and I plan will piss off people I do not want reading my book. And I hope that they will give 1-star reviews on the book, because bad reviews from bad people are good reviews.
I was smiling you're saying that because I always reference I'm one of those like old school wrestling fans. And one of the things that is known among, professional sports entertainers, wrestlers, whatever you call them, WWE, is that it doesn't matter if you hate the person or you love the person. The point is you made the person feel something, which I think is really intriguing. All right. So now I'm curious. You mentioned you go for an 80 or so plus books. Do you have any social life? It's got to be really hard to do all the time and effort. I mean, I can't imagine, just when you're in the zone and writing, you probably block out so many things around you that it's just hard to do things other than write.
Yes. So I have a wife and children, and this, for the most part, they are my social life. Gosh, them and Twitter is my social life. In the last 5 years since our first child was born, I think I've been in a room of just adults twice in about 5 years, of just adults in 5 years. But Twitter is how I connect with the world, really.
That's fair. Okay, so let's talk about So Good They Call You a Fake, which I think is a brilliant kind of heading title there. Command attention, monetize your talent stack, and become the uncontested authority in your niche. Yeah, first of all, why write that book? What's the sort of real overarching theme behind the book, and what's been the initial reception?
Yes, the reception has been fantastic. Most people are saying that it is, from their perspective, more useful, more valuable, and more practical than books like Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson and $100 Million Offers by Alex Hormozy. Because those sorts of books, the typical perennial business bestsellers, they tend to be full on inspiration, motivation, and have these stories that stick. But the problem is many readers will finish those types of books and then wonder, okay, now what do I do? No, seriously, what do I do? Step by step with no step skip. And that is the pitch for this book of mine, So Good They Call You a Fake, is what do you need to do step by step with no step skipped to go from being a nobody to being the household name of your industry? How do you monetize your existing expertise and knowledge? How do you package them in such a way that you can reach the maximum number of people with varying types of products and services? Now, that is not the book that I was supposed to write. And this is how I open one of the chapters in my own book. I say that the book that you've been reading so far, this is not the book I was supposed to write. A ghostwriter is supposed to write a book called How to Write a Book. But I realized, first of all, that's a little solipsistic and grifty. And second of all, I don't just help people write books. I document their system for genius. And then I transform that documented system into a book and sometimes into a course as well. And so I thought the most useful book I could possibly release to the world is to contribute to the conversation around the great transition from little known bona fide expert to ultra successful known authority. And of course, authorities are important enough to have haters. They are significant enough to attract naysayers and people who are quote unquote calling bull on their claims. And that from my perspective, is the last rite of passage into excellence is when you're so good, people call you a fake. And how to do that and how to make as much money off of that as possible. That's the gist of the book. And of course, along the way, I teach people how to write an authority book and also build courses and coaching and consulting offers and high-end services and all the things that I have both taught to and learned from my clients over the years.
Let's talk about the due diligence process, right? So presumably if it's like a biography, you got to spend a lot of time talking to somebody and then doing research, some of which may be factual, some of which may not be. But yeah, I have to assume you also have to have the mindset of almost like a really thorough journalist to make sure that what you're writing about is accurate.
Oh, yes. Depending on the space that I am writing in, there could be 50, 80, 300 plus citations to papers or to first person accounts or to case studies or to actual legitimate sources that back the person's claim, rather than just, oh, here's my opinion on a bunch of matters, right? Now, I'm at this point able to tell what the green lights and red flags are for a given author. And one thing I've noticed is that absolute schmucks use the word mindset a lot. And so I tweet that mindset is what you talk about when you have no practical advice. And there's a hilarious story in chapter 2 of the book that exposes one of the mindset mavens that I worked for and how hard they are to ghostwrite for because they don't have a system. They don't have a system for genius, and they are not a genius. They are a people that I do not want to be successful. And that's one of the groups of people I hope to alienate and cultivate organic 1-star haters and reviews out of, is people who are all about mindset, this, that, and the other. Because like I said, that's what you talk about when you don't have practical advice. I also take issue with the typical pitch of the coaching industry. And there's a chapter on how to and how not to coach, whether you're a coach and an author or just a coach, and how to do it right. And also how not to do it. And so at this point, this book can also become a bit of a guide, you might say, to how to avoid people who optimize for revenue over results. Because I want to help people who've optimized for results over revenue. They're excellent, but they're only charging $150 a session, and their client and their competitors are charging clients $15,000, and they're barely beginner level competence. And yet the true experts are having to do this thing as a side hustle in some cases because they haven't figured out how to monetize effectively. That's who this book is targeted towards. And eventually they will be so successful, I can work with them as their ghostwriter for their book. I did, in fact, ghostwrite a book on that exact topic for a business coach. The book is called Become Immune to Manipulation. And the context is not just business and workplace, but also social and interpersonal manipulative tactics and how they're deployed with both personal examples and anecdotes and also well-known stories, but the story behind the story. You know, we all recognize that most business problems are people problems, and most people problems are a person problem, and that person is usually a grade A manipulator. And so what are the tactics that they're using to sway their side into doing their bidding? And how do you make yourself immune to that? So there is a book on it. It's quite excellent in my opinion. And the author is so good, they call him a fake. And he's one of the case studies. He's one of the stories inside my own book.
I need to get some affiliate commissions on that. I got to figure that out at some point. Okay. So I'd be remiss to not address the role of AI on ghostwriting. And if that becomes maybe one of those professions that becomes challenged as these large language models get more and more complicated, complex. I'm sure you've played around with it maybe a tiny bit, Joshua, but is there anything to the idea that a lot of the ghostwriting side of the world gets replaced by artificial intelligence?
Likely the bottom 90% of ghostwriters are in the process of being replaced just because what ChatGPT pumps out for virtually free is superior to what a typical ghostwriter does. So in this profession, there are these quote unquote 85% off ghostwriters. Their advertisements are unavoidable. They're everywhere. And the technique that they use, because two of my authors had previously hired them, and then realized, oh yeah, I guess you do get what you pay for. One of their tactics is to copy and paste articles from Wikipedia into your manuscript and then change a couple of the words, and then now that's your quote unquote book. That, of course, doesn't work. And that's the vast majority of ghostwriters, that level of sophistication and research depth. So they're instantly annihilated because of ChatGPT. At the same time, authors who are aspiring authorities do not use ChatGPT for their book. They just don't. Now, they might do it for research purposes or as a brainstorming partner. One thing that is helpful is using AI to rewrite raw transcript with the uhs and the ums and the false starts and the back and forths to slightly edit that transcript and make it into something that is readable and is workable. So in the hands of a professional ghostwriter, it makes the ghostwriter's job easier. Things take less time, so they have more time and energy and bandwidth, frankly, for the stuff that matters most. And I'll say this, that AI could not have written my book because there were connections I was able to make because I and I alone have access to my entire corpus, you might say. And that's most experts who aspire to be authorities. They could have their own LLM on their local computer. They could feed a bunch of stuff into it, but there are going to be outside connections and strokes of genius that occur, which are outside the corpus. So for example, I had wanted to write my tell-all semi-memoir for 3 years, and I had been working on it for that period of time. And I did not want to be the solipsistic and grifty ghostwriter who writes a book on how to write books, because that's not contributing anything new to the space, to the genre. And I was just not sure what to do about my book. It had been on my mind, and so I just continued writing my clients' books. And then one day, with my little boy, I was watching a new video that had been published to YouTube by the trick shot group, Dude Perfect. And it was one of these videos, one of the members had said, "Hey, I'm going to hit a hole in one." He walks up on this par 3 to the tee box and he hits a hole in one. I thought, okay, that's ridiculous. That's just no way. And then moments later, there was another clip that came up suggested by YouTube. And one of the members was on Good Morning America. And he said, "We love it when people call us fake because that means we just get more YouTube views." And the clouds opened at that moment. And I saw the title of my book written in the sky. So good they call you a fake. And of course, Dude Perfect is the opening story of the introduction. And hilariously enough, Dude Perfect, if you Google Dude Perfect conspiracy, Dude Perfect fake, Dude Perfect scam, there is an entire underworld internet subculture of people who have quote unquote figured out how Dude Perfect does these ridiculous trick shots with Photoshop and other sorts of sleight of hand techniques. And that just goes to show how good they are, is that terminally online people cannot imagine how good they really are and have to be in order to produce results at that level. And I then made the connection that an AI probably would not have, given they did not have access to that Dude Perfect interview in connection to my own experiences. I realized that is something my own clients have done over the years, that they have gotten 1-star reviews for people saying, "There's no way this is legit. This person's obviously lying. They're a cheater." I have one cardiologist client. He wrote the foreword to my book and he said, "Joshua, you should have titled it So Good They Call You a Quack," because that's been my experience. And he's pointed out that his book has created an internet firestorm that spreads his name farther and wider than he ever could on his own. And that's why I say haters are your most valuable marketers, because they create conspiracies about how there's no way you can do what you say you can do. And then they create a crowd that enables you to command the attention of both people who will write up conspiracies about how you're a fake and also people who will look in awe at your results and say, "Wow, this person is the real deal. I have to learn more. This is the person I want to work with and pay $10,000 an hour to," which is something I teach how to do in my book.
You may have revealed the underlying reason why I have my persona the way I have it on Twitter. I'll just leave it at that on my end. But anyway, listen, everybody, again, please make sure you follow Joshua Lisec here on Twitter. Other than Twitter, Joshua, where else can people find some of your work?
Yeah, so Good They Call You Fake. It's already #1 international bestseller on Amazon. Just got into the top 5,000, which is pretty neat. Of all the books out there, closing on 3,000 copies sold since June the 1st. So just a little over almost 2.5 weeks already, which is pretty spectacular. And my website is lisecghostwriting.com. That's where all the business of publishing and ghostwriting is located. But my absolute best shenanigans are going to be here on Twitter.
Thank you for joining. Thank you, Joshua. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Michael.